Don't look back, someone whispered behind me. I froze, as if a bucket of ice water had been poured down my spine. Every muscle screamed to turn, but something in that voice pinned me still. For a few long seconds, I sat rigid on the creaky chair in the back row of the old town hall. The air smelled of aged timber and dust drifting through thin beams of light, while the murmur of the crowd pressed in like a low tide. Everyone was waiting for the main event, the announcement my father was about to make. Up front, near the podium, my brother John sat straight-backed, polished, smiling with all the certainty of a man who already owned the future. He was 25, and the whole town knew he was the golden heir. Tonight my father would formally hand him everything: the grain elevator worth millions, the broad acres of farmland, the family house, even the brand-new Ford pickup parked outside like a trophy. And me? I sat further back, almost invisible. That was always my role, present, but never truly seen. Even here, in a hall where our family name was carved into history, I felt like an outsider. "Mary," a quiet voice said beside me. I turned this time. A stranger in a worn leather jacket stood at my elbow. He looked as though he had come straight off the highway, dust on his boots, eyes deep and watchful. Without another word, he handed me an envelope. "For you," he said, then disappeared into the crowd as suddenly as he had appeared. The envelope was thick, heavy. My heartbeat quickened as I slipped it under my purse, hiding it on my lap. At the podium, my father's voice rang out loud, commanding, the kind of voice that filled every corner of a room. "Friends, neighbors, family, tonight we stand at the threshold of a new era." I knew that tone by heart. Every sentence from him was about legacy, endurance, strength. Never about me. My life had always been a story of comparisons. John, bright, quick, exceptional. Me, the dreamer, the one people dismissed with a polite smile. I remember third grade vividly. I built a poster of the water cycle, clouds made of cotton, painted arrows showing how the river rose and fell. I beamed as I set it on the dining table for my father to see. He glanced once and muttered, "Pretty, but do you remember the science, Mary? Drawings don't make money." Later that evening, John, barely more than a toddler, showed him a bulb he and Dad had wired to a tiny battery. Father lifted him high in the air as though he'd split the atom. "Now that's true genius. That's the future of our business." My cotton ball clouds faded from memory that night. It never changed. Through school, I bent over books long after midnight, straining for a B, maybe an A- if I was lucky. At home, it was dismissed as average. Meanwhile, John came home with certificates and trophies, and the entire house celebrated. My mother, elegant in her pearls and pressed dresses, loved to say, "John's our businessman, our pride." "You, Mary, just make sure you look presentable." Only Mrs. Cole, our housekeeper, ever really looked at me. One evening, she found me crying after another withering comment from my father. She stroked my hair and whispered, "You've got a different kind of mind, Mary. Not like your brother's. But that doesn't make it less. Someday you'll see." Back then, I didn't believe her. Now, in the town hall, all those memories pressed down as I held the envelope tight in my lap. I knew there was something inside, something that could shift everything. But did I have the courage to open it? Father's voice thundered on. "Our business is built on honesty, on work, and above all on the kind of intelligence that passes down through generations. And tonight, I want to announce." His gaze turned to John. The audience leaned forward, already applauding before the words even left his mouth. My hands trembled. The envelope seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Then another whisper. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the roar. "It's time." I whipped around. The rows behind me were empty. At the podium, my father lifted a glass of water, sipped, and declared, "That from this day forward, John is the heir to everything I've built." The room erupted in cheers, but I barely heard them. Heat boiled in my chest. Slowly, I raised the envelope higher, pressing it to me like a shield. The hall buzzed with triumph, but I knew in a moment that triumph could crack wide open. The flap of the envelope slipped open, just enough for me to glimpse the words on the top page, "Deed of Ownership." I tightened my grip. My own whisper rose above the din, steady, final. "Their time is over." The envelope weighed heavier than any object I'd ever held, though it could not have been more than a few sheets of paper. My palms were damp against the coarse paper. I pressed it tight against my lap as though someone might try to snatch it away. Father's voice rolled through the hall like a storm wind. Our family has stood for generations on the foundation of labor, loyalty, and vision. Tonight, we honor that legacy. Applause thundered. I watched from the shadows while John sat tall in the front row, his chin lifted, his smile fixed, the picture of a young man born to inherit everything. He didn't look back at me. He never did. I lowered my eyes to the envelope. A thin corner of paper peeked through the flap, the single phrase I had glimpsed etched into my mind, deed of ownership. My chest tightened. Whose deed? Mine? Someone else's? The very possibility that my name could be on it sent a tremor through my body. But before I could act, the memories came rushing, as if the walls of the old hall had cracked and poured my childhood back into me. I was 8 years old the first time I understood what it meant to be second best. It was spring, the scent of tilled earth heavy in the air, when the school science fair arrived. I had worked for weeks, studying sound waves. On a battered card table in our kitchen, I had set up jars of water, a small radio, and a string of notes showing how vibration shaped liquid patterns. "Watch, Daddy," I said that night as I demonstrated. The water shivered, tiny ripples forming concentric rings. My heart beat fast, proud of what I had done. Father looked at his watch, his patience already thin. "Sounds interesting, Mary. Just remember not to mumble when you present. You know how that makes you sound." His tone was distracted, dismissive. Then John burst in, not even in middle school yet, clutching sheets of paper covered in code. He had written a small program on the family's clunky desktop computer, one that could calculate prime numbers. Father's eyes lit up. He pulled up a chair, sitting beside my brother as though he were his equal. "Now this is brilliance. Algorithms, efficiency, real talent." He spent 2 hours with John that night, leaving my jars of water forgotten on the counter until the ripples stilled and the patterns vanished. That was the rhythm of my childhood, my small triumphs eclipsed by John's effortless brilliance. High school only deepened the gulf. My grades were scraped together through sleepless nights, while John skipped grades, took college-level classes, and seemed to sail without effort. Our parents' pride in him was boundless, their disappointment in me barely veiled. I once overheard Father at a parent-teacher conference, his voice cutting like a blade. "Mary has always been the disappointment academically. We've tried everything. She simply doesn't have the Lawrence aptitude. At least John will carry the family forward." I stood frozen outside the classroom door, clutching my jacket, my heart splintering. That night I cried alone until Mrs. Cole, our housekeeper, found me. She sat on my bed, her worn hands smoothing my hair. "Your project was wonderful, Mary. Don't let them blind you. Different kinds of intelligence matter in this world. Someday they'll see it." I clung to her words for years like a life raft. By the time I reached 17, I was suffocating inside that house of comparisons. John had already been accepted to the state university on an early program, while I was barely scraping toward community college. Mother fussed endlessly over his clothes, his interviews, his future. For me, she spared only criticisms: my hair too flat, my dress too plain, my body not quite slim enough. My 16th birthday was the cruelest reminder. Mother promised a small dinner for me. I invited only one friend, a girl named Danielle from photography club. But the night before, John won a youth science award, and suddenly our home filled with 24 business associates and neighbors for his celebration. At one end of the long dining table, everyone toasted John while he described his award-winning project. At the other, Danielle and I sat before a forgotten birthday cake, its candles sagging into melted wax. Mother finally drifted over long enough to murmur, "Happy birthday, dear," before returning to bask in John's spotlight. Later, Danielle hugged me tightly, whispering, "You deserve so much better, Mary." She was right. I fled the family estate soon after graduation, leaving behind the grand farmhouse with its wide lawns and endless shadows. I rented a single-room apartment above a laundromat near the community college. The walls smelled faintly of detergent, the bed squeaked with every turn, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I could breathe without their eyes on me. It was there, in that cramped room, that I stumbled across my truth. An observant counselor suggested testing, and the results came back, moderate to severe dyslexia. Far from crushing me, the diagnosis was liberation. I wasn't lazy or stupid or a perpetual disappointment. My brain simply worked differently. At last, the years of swimming letters and collapsing numbers had a name. With the right tools, extended test times, text-to-speech software, patient mentors, I began to thrive. More than thrive. For the first time, I was free. Photography had always been my refuge, but now I found a new passion: coding. My dyslexia, the very thing that had dragged me down, gave me a strange advantage. I didn't follow patterns the way others did. I saw workarounds, unconventional paths, visual solutions others overlooked. One of my professors noticed. "You approach problems differently, Mary. That's rare. Don't lose it." I built a small project on my battered laptop, a browser tool that altered text display for dyslexic readers. Letters spread more evenly, words slowed their blur, the page felt calmer. I named it Clear Text. When I showed it to my professor, her eyes widened. "This could help a lot of people. Have you thought of taking it further?" I had not. But the idea rooted itself in me like a seed. The town hall around me came back into focus. Father's voice thundered, "And so John inherits the full responsibility of the Lawrence enterprise." The crowd erupted in cheers. My brother stood, flushed with pride, bowing his head in thanks. I gripped the envelope tighter. Memories of dismissal, of invisibility, of nights spent proving myself to no one but the silence. Every sting, every shadow fed into the pulse of my heartbeat. I wanted to stand, to rip open the envelope, to speak. But my breath caught. My courage wavered. The years of being silenced pressed against me like iron bars. Then again, that whisper. Close, insistent, though I knew no one was there. "It's time." My pulse surged. My knees trembled as I rose an inch from the chair before sinking back down. All around me, the applause still roared for John. Father raised his hands, basking in the glow of his chosen heir. I looked down at the envelope once more. The flap parted further, enough for me to see the bold words on the top line, "Deed of Ownership." And beneath it, just enough to catch my breath, my own name. I gasped softly. My name, printed in black ink, inside the envelope that had landed in my hands from a stranger. My heart hammered, louder than the applause. They thought the night belonged to John. But I knew, with sudden clarity, that this story was mine. The hall still rang with applause, the kind that echoed from the old rafters and rattled in the window panes. My father basked in it like a preacher at the pulpit, his hand resting proudly on John's shoulder. Their silhouettes, framed by the warm glow of the chandelier, made the whole moment look like a painting of inheritance, of legacy passed neatly from one generation to the next. But beneath the thunder of clapping palms, my world had gone silent. I stared at the envelope trembling in my hands. My name stared back at me from the top of the document inside, sharp black letters declaring something I never expected: Mary Lawrence, owner. I pressed it closed before anyone else could see. The edges bit into my palms, and I forced myself to steady my breathing. No one around me noticed. To them I was still the quiet sister, the forgotten one. Invisible. I leaned back in the chair, letting the memories flood in, filling every corner of my chest. I was 19 when I left the family estate behind. My father had barely looked up from his morning paper when I told him. "I'm moving out," I said, voice trembling but firm. His eyes didn't lift. "To where?" "The apartments by the highway. I'll be starting community college." He lowered the paper then, his blue eyes slicing through me. "Community college," he repeated, like the phrase itself tasted foul. "Mary, that's all right, I suppose. Not everyone is meant for Harvard." He said it slowly, deliberately, letting the words sink like stones. Mother didn't even protest. She simply muttered, "What will people think?" while adjusting the pearl clasp at her neck. No farewell dinner. No photographs on the porch like when John left for the university. Just a strained silence as I packed my bags and carried them down the long gravel drive. Mrs. Cole hugged me the tightest, whispering, "Find your own light, child. Even if you have to build it yourself." I didn't understand it then, but I do now. The apartment was barely big enough for a bed, a desk, and the secondhand camera I carried everywhere. Nights smelled of detergent from the laundromat below and sounded of rattling pipes. Yet in that small space I breathed for the first time. When the test confirmed dyslexia, I cried, not from shame but from relief. Years of stumbling through text and numbers suddenly had a name. I wasn't broken. I was simply different. That difference became my compass. At the college computer lab, I stayed until closing time, piecing together small programs that adjusted spacing, fonts, speed of text. When words no longer swam on the screen, I felt something ignite in me. I called my project Clear Text. One evening, Professor Taylor stopped at my desk, her silver-streaked hair glowing under the harsh fluorescent lights. She leaned over, scanning my code. "You see patterns differently, Mary," she said. "Where most students follow a straight line, you find a curve no one else imagined. Don't lose that." Her words stayed with me. For once, I wasn't the family disappointment. I was something else. Months later, at a small tech showcase in a dusty gymnasium, I set up a folding table with a borrowed monitor to demonstrate clear text. Most people walked past. A few teachers asked polite questions. I was ready to pack up when a tall man in a dark coat stopped. He studied the screen, then me. His eyes were calm, measured, seeing more than most. "Does it help?" he asked. "For me?" "Yes," I said cautiously. "It slows down the letters. They don't twist as much. People like me can finally read without drowning." He nodded, fascinated. "And it could help others?" "I think so." He extended a card. "Samuel Wright. Wright Investments." The name rattled something in my memory, a respected venture firm known for spotting hidden gems. "This has potential," he said. "Not just business potential. Human potential. If you're willing, I'd like to talk more." My fingers shook as I accepted the card. Back in the town hall, the air was still buzzing with congratulations for John. I forced myself to remain still, to hide the envelope beneath my purse. John turned briefly, scanning the crowd, and for the smallest fraction of a second, his eyes met mine. His smile faltered. He looked almost apologetic. Then he turned back as another neighbor clapped his back. I swallowed the lump in my throat. John had never mocked me directly. If anything, he seemed uneasy with how our parents treated us. But he never stopped it either. He never defended me. He just let it happen. And now he was the chosen heir, while I sat in the shadows holding a truth that could burn through the whole facade. I thought of my first meeting with Samuel Wright in a coffee shop downtown, far from the polished world my family inhabited. "Your story matters," he had said, sipping slowly, eyes fixed on mine. "But if you're not ready to tell it, we can shield you. Use another name. Build your company without the weight of theirs." "A pseudonym?" I asked. He smiled. "Plenty of founders do it. What would you choose?" I hesitated. Then the answer came easily: Mary Cole. Samuel nodded approvingly. "For the woman who believed in you when no one else did?" I blinked. "How did you know?" "Because you said her name like a prayer." Mary Cole became my armor. Under that name, clear text grew into something real. Schools signed on. Universities reached out. Small contracts became larger ones. Letters poured in from students who could finally keep up, from parents who saw their children smile while reading for the first time. And through it all, my family knew nothing. At holiday dinners, I sat quietly as my father boasted about John's internships, his research, his inevitable place as successor. "And Mary," a guest might ask politely. "Oh, she tinkers with photography," my mother would say, waving a manicured hand. "She's finding her way." I would sip my water, biting back the truth that under another name I was building something that would eclipse them all. Now, staring at the envelope, I realized Samuel had finally decided it was time. He had sent someone, some stranger in that leather jacket, to hand me proof of what I already knew but had hidden for years. Proof of ownership, of power, of a future not defined by my father's legacy but by my own. My breath caught as father raised his glass again, the crystal catching the light. "To my son John, he declared. The future of the Lawrence name, the Lawrence business, the Lawrence spirit. The room erupted once more. I looked down at the envelope, at the faint outline of my own name behind the flap. My hands tightened. As the applause swelled, I whispered under my breath, too soft for anyone else to hear. You think the future belongs to John. But it belongs to me. The applause faded into scattered chatter as neighbors filed out of the town hall. The wooden doors creaked on their rusted hinges, letting in the cool night air, scented faintly of cut hay and gasoline from trucks waiting outside. I stayed in my seat until the last of the crowd dispersed, my hand gripping the envelope as though it might vanish if I let go. Father stood near the front, shaking hands, booming laughter echoing across the room. John at his side looked exhausted, his smile stiff, but he carried it all the same. Mother hovered close, her pearls catching the dim light like drops of frost. No one glanced toward me. When I finally rose, the sound of my chair scraping the floor startled me. My father looked up briefly, his eyes passing over me the way a man glances at old furniture, there, but unimportant. I clutched the envelope tighter. Someday soon, those same eyes would see me differently. That night I walked back along Main Street, the pavement cracked, the street lamps buzzing with tired electricity. The small town was quiet, only the hum of a jukebox leaking from the diner and the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. My reflection ghosted in the dark shop windows, a woman in a plain dress, hair tied back, face unreadable. I stopped beneath the awning of the closed hardware store and finally tore the envelope open. The papers slid out, cool and crisp under my fingers. The first was a deed, not to the Lawrence elevator, not to my father's acres of land. It was for Cleartext Technologies Incorporated, the company Samuel and I had built, registered officially under my birth name. Not Mary Cole. Not the shadow identity I'd hidden behind. But Mary Lawrence. For the first time, my two worlds were colliding. The second document was more shocking still, an acquisition proposal, drafted formally, offering to purchase Lawrence grain and supply at a value 20% above market. The buyer? Cleartext Technologies. My company. My knees weakened. I pressed against the cold brick wall, letting the paper flap in the wind. Samuel had planned this. He had forced my hand. 2 nights earlier, we'd met in his office, the lamps low, the city lights glimmering through the tall windows. You can't hide forever, Mary, Samuel said, sliding the papers across his desk. His voice was calm, almost fatherly, but with an iron weight behind it. They will announce John as heir. It's inevitable. But at the same moment, you could show the truth. Not out of spite. Out of strength. I shook my head. You don't know my father. He doesn't bend. He doesn't even see me. Samuel leaned forward, his eyes sharp. He'll have no choice when the market does the talking. When the company he mocked as useless eclipses the empire he worships. He tapped the deed with one finger. This is yours. All of it. But only if you step into the light. No more shadows, Mary. I had stared at the document, my heart twisting. What if I'm not ready? His voice softened. Revenge is easy. Truth is harder. But the world deserves to see the truth. The memory snapped back as a gust of wind nearly pulled the papers from my hands. I gathered them, pressing them close, my heart hammering. A sound scraped behind me. Boots on pavement. I turned. John stood a few feet away, his tie loosened, his jacket slung over one shoulder. His face was pale under the flickering street lamp. I thought I'd find you here, he said quietly. My throat tightened. Why? He glanced at the papers clutched against my chest. His eyes softened. Because I know you, Mary. You don't celebrate with the crowd. You never did. I wanted to lash out, to remind him of all the nights I was left invisible while he basked in the glow. But his tone disarmed me. You don't look happy, I said bitterly. Shouldn't you be celebrating? You're the heir, after all. He hesitated, then stepped closer. You think this is what I wanted? All these years, being paraded around like a prize bull. I stared, startled by his words. Dad made it clear, John went on. My life wasn't mine. It was his blueprint. His legacy. And he trailed off, his shoulders slumping. I never asked for it. For a moment, Silence stretched between us, broken only by the buzz of the street lamp. "John," I whispered, "if you knew how it felt for me, always being the shadow." "I did know," he interrupted softly. "And I hated it. I hated how they treated you. But I was a kid. I didn't know how to stop it." The bitterness in me fought against the flicker of understanding. "You could have said something," I accused. He lowered his eyes. "I was too busy surviving their expectations." We stood there, brother and sister, bound by this same chain forged differently for each of us, mine of neglect, his of pressure. Finally, he looked up. "Mary, what was in that envelope?" I stiffened, clutching the papers tighter. "It's nothing you need to worry about." He studied me carefully. "Whatever it is, be careful. Dad doesn't take kindly to surprises." Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the night. I exhaled shakily, my pulse still racing. Be careful. It was too late for that. Back in my apartment, I spread the documents across my desk. The deed, the acquisition offer, the signatures already lined up. Clear text was ready to strike. And for the first time, I imagined it, my father standing at a table, forced to face me not as the forgotten daughter, but as the owner of the company that could swallow his whole. The thought sent a shiver through me, equal parts terror and exhilaration. Outside my window, a truck rumbled past, its headlights sweeping across the room. For a heartbeat, the glare caught on the glass, and in the reflection, I thought I saw a figure standing behind me. When I spun around, the room was empty. But the whisper was there, curling through the dark like smoke. "Don't stop now." The figure in the reflection haunted me long after the truck had gone. My apartment was silent except for the tick of the wall clock, each second pounding like a warning. I checked every corner twice, the closet, the bathroom, even under the bed, nothing. But the whisper still clung to me. "Don't stop now." I sat back at my desk, the deed and acquisition papers spread out before me like weapons. The truth was undeniable. Samuel had placed everything into my hands. All that remained was whether I would use it. The next morning, I walked to the diner on Main Street. The place smelled of burnt coffee and fried bacon, the same as it had since I was a child. Old men in seed caps hunched over their mugs, gossiping in voices roughened by dust and whiskey. As I slid into a booth, the waitress, Mrs. Thompson, who had known me since grade school, raised her brows. "Well, if it isn't Mary Lawrence. Haven't seen you around here in months." Her tone wasn't cruel, but it carried that familiar undertone, the forgotten one, the disappointment. "Coffee, black," I said quietly. The bell over the door jingled. Heads turned. My father strode in with John at his side, the air shifting instantly around them. Even here, in this modest diner, father carried authority like a cloak. He stopped to shake hands, nodding to each table, his booming laugh filling the room. I ducked slightly in my booth, praying he wouldn't notice me. But of course he did. "Mary," he said, approaching with that same distant politeness, as though addressing a distant cousin. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Just coffee," I muttered. John gave me a faint nod, his eyes cautious, almost protective. Father waved to the waitress. "Bring her breakfast too. She could use it." He chuckled, a comment about my thin frame disguised as generosity. The men at the counter laughed obligingly. Heat crawled up my neck. I wanted to slam the deed onto the table, to shout the truth for all to hear. But not yet. Not like this. Instead, I met his eyes and said, "I can buy my own breakfast." The laughter faded. Father's smile thinned. For a moment his eyes sharpened, studying me as if trying to place what had changed. Then he dismissed it with a shrug and moved on to another table. When they left, John lingered at the door, glancing back at me. I caught his look, part worry, part plea. Then he was gone, swallowed back into Father's orbit. I sat motionless, the coffee cooling in my hands. That was the moment I realized there was no going back. Not after seeing the smirk on Father's face, hearing the condescension in every syllable. This town had written me off years ago. My parents had branded me second best before I could spell the word. If I stayed silent now, I would remain invisible forever. But if I acted. That night I called Samuel. His voice was steady, calm. "So, you've read the documents." "I have," I said. My throat felt raw. You want me to bring this into the open? To stand against him? I want you to stand for yourself, Samuel corrected gently. But yes, it's time. I paced the narrow length of my apartment, the floorboards creaking beneath my restless steps. If I do this, he'll never forgive me. Mary, Samuel said softly, he never gave you anything to forgive. The words pierced me. Silence stretched as I pressed a hand against the cold glass of my window, looking down at the empty street below. When? I whispered. At the celebration dinner, Samuel replied. He's rented out the country club hall for Saturday. Everyone will be there, investors, town officials, neighbors. He plans to crown John in front of them all. That's when you'll tell the truth. My stomach turned. Samuel, I don't know if I can. You can, he said firmly. And when you do, you won't just be the forgotten daughter anymore. You'll be the woman who took her life back. After we hung up, I sat in darkness, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. My reflection stared back from the window, pale, tense, but with something new in the eyes. A spark. I pulled the deed closer, tracing the letters of my name. Mary Lawrence, owner. The old me would have hidden it away, too afraid to confront the storm. But the old me was gone. She had been buried under years of ridicule and silence. What remained was something harder. Something sharper. The next day, I visited Mrs. Cole. She lived in a modest house at the edge of town, her garden thick with wildflowers. Her hands were frielier now, her back stooped, but her eyes still carried the same warmth. Mary, she said, folding me into a hug. I knew you'd come when the time was right. I blinked, startled. How did you? She smiled faintly. I've seen the papers. Word travels, even to old women like me. Samuel asked me years ago if you had the strength. I told him yes. My breath caught. You knew. I believed in you when no one else did, she said simply. And I still do. I sank into her worn couch, tears burning my eyes. For a moment I was a child again, clinging to the only person who had ever told me I was enough. Do you think I can face him? I asked softly. Her voice was steady. You've already faced him, Mary. Every day of your life. Saturday will just make it visible to the rest of the world. As I walked home through the twilight, the cicadas buzzing in the trees, I felt a shift inside me. The fear was still there, coiled tight, but beneath it was something fiercer. Resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every child ever silenced, every voice ever dismissed. My father had spent a lifetime building his empire on the myth of his own brilliance. But on Saturday, I would show him and everyone else the truth. That night, as I locked my door, an envelope lay on the floor just inside, slid through the gap. No return address. Just my name scrawled across the front. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in neat letters. They don't know the whole truth. And neither do you. The paper quivered in my hands as though the words themselves carried weight. They don't know the whole truth. And neither do you. I read it once. Twice. A third time. My pulse throbbed in my ears. The type was clean, the page crisp, but the message, its meaning slipped through my fingers like smoke. What truth? What was missing? I set the note down, my hands trembling, and listened. The apartment was silent. Too silent. I walked to the door, pressed my ear against it. Nothing. No footsteps in the hall, no voices. But someone had been here. Someone close enough to slide the envelope under my door without a sound. Sleep never came. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the shadows shifting with the headlights that crawled past on the street below. Every creak of the building made me sit up, my breath quick and shallow. By dawn, I gave up. I made coffee strong enough to burn my throat and spread the documents across the table again, the deed, the acquisition papers, the new note. I tried to focus on what I knew. Clear text was mine, legally and unquestionably. Samuel had ensured every dotted line and signature. On Saturday, at the country club dinner, I could lay the truth bare for everyone. And yet, what if the stranger was right? What if there was something hidden even deeper? That afternoon, I called Samuel. Someone left me a message, I said, my voice low. They said I don't know the whole truth. There was a pause on the line, the faint scratch of his pen against paper. What kind of message? A note. Slid under my door. Another pause. Then his tone firmed. Ignore it. Fear is a weapon, Mary. Someone doesn't want you to step into the light. They'll try to shake your confidence. That's all this is. But what if? No, he interrupted, his voice like steel. You've already carried this company on your back. You've built something real, something undeniable. The only truth that matters is in those papers on your desk. Don't let ghosts stop you. I wanted to believe him. I wanted his certainty to be mine. But as I hung up, the unease lingered like a splinter beneath my skin. That evening, I walked through town to clear my head. The streets were quiet, the windows of the shops dark except for the flicker of neon at the diner. As I passed the old grain elevator, the one that had been the spine of my father's empire, I stopped. The place loomed against the twilight sky, rust streaking down its sides, the air thick with the smell of dust and oil. My childhood had been steeped in this building, its machinery groaning day and night. Father used to bring John here, showing him the gears, the numbers, the profits. I was never invited. Now, standing before it, I realized something I hadn't before. This empire wasn't timeless. It was rotting, rust spreading through its bones. Without change, it would crumble. And I had the power to decide whether to let it die or remake it in my own image. My hand tightened around the strap of my bag. Saturday wasn't just revenge. It was justice. At home, I tried to eat, but the food tasted like sawdust. The note haunted me. I pulled it out again, studying every letter. The typewriter ink was faintly uneven, an old machine, not a modern printer. That detail lodged in my mind like a clue. Who in this town still used a typewriter? Mrs. Cole? No. She could barely write checks these days. The library? Maybe. The county office? Possibly. Or was it someone closer? The thought of John flickered through me, uninvited. Could he have written it? To warn me? To stop me? His eyes at the diner, the way he'd said be careful. I folded the note and shoved it into the envelope with the rest, my stomach knotted. Friday passed in a haze. Every hour felt like a countdown. At the college, my small team worked remotely, unaware of the storm brewing. I answered emails, checked code, smiled through video calls. But beneath the surface my thoughts churned. By sunset, I could no longer stay still. I drove out to the old family farmhouse. The gravel crunched beneath my tires, the porch light still glowing like a watchful eye. Through the window, I saw them, father at the head of the table, mother poised beside him, John across, listening with a stiff smile. It was the same tableau I had grown up with. The chosen ones inside, me always outside, watching. My hands clenched on the steering wheel. Tomorrow that would end. As I turned the car around, headlights swept across the trees lining the drive. And there, just for an instant, I saw someone standing at the edge of the woods. A tall figure, unmoving, watching. I braked hard, the tires spitting gravel. But when I looked again, the trees were empty, only shadows swaying in the wind. I drove off with my heart pounding, the words from the note ringing louder than ever. They don't know the whole truth. And neither do you. Back in my apartment, I packed carefully for Saturday. The navy dress I'd chosen hung on the door, pressed and ready. The deed and acquisition offer I sealed into a clean envelope, marked only with my name. As I slid it into my bag, I whispered aloud, just to steady myself. This time, they'll hear me. The clock ticked midnight. My reflection in the window stared back at me, tense and sharp. The girl who once cried over forgotten science projects was gone. In her place stood a woman holding fire. Just as I turned off the light, the phone rang. The old landline, silent for months, shrilled into the darkness. I lifted the receiver with a shaking hand. On the other end, a voice I hadn't heard in years whispered. Mary, they lied to you about everything. The voice on the line was hushed, low, almost trembling. Mary, they lied to you about everything. My breath caught. I pressed the receiver harder against my ear, the coiled cord tangling in my hand. Who is this? Silence. A faint crackle of static. Tell me who you are. My voice rose, sharper than I intended. At last, the whisper came again. Not on the phone. Tomorrow, before the dinner. By the old train depot. 7 o'clock. If you want the truth, come alone. The line went dead. I stood in the dark, the hum of the refrigerator loud as thunder, the silence pressing on me. The depot hadn't been used in decades. I remembered it from childhood trips, dusty benches, peeling paint, pigeons nesting in the rafters. Father had always told us to stay away. Nothing good happens there, he'd said. Maybe that was why my pulse quickened at the thought of going. Was this a trap? A cruel game to shake me before I faced him tomorrow? Or was it real? I slid down the wall, the phone clattering against the floor. The note, the shadow by the trees, the voice on the phone, they were all pieces of something bigger. And I was no longer sure I understood the shape of it. The next morning, I dressed mechanically. My team pinged me with updates. Samuel called twice, but I ignored it all. My focus narrowed to the depot. By evening, the sky was swollen with storm clouds. The air smelled of rain and metal as I walked down the cracked platform. The building loomed ahead, its windows dark, its roof sagging. I stepped inside. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of damp wood. My footsteps echoed on the old tiles. "Hello," I called. A figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, shoulders stooped, a face I hadn't seen in over a decade. I gasped. "Uncle David?" He looked older, thinner, his hair gray at the temples. But the eyes were the same, piercing, restless. My father's younger brother, who had disappeared when I was a child. "They told me you left," I whispered. "That you couldn't handle the business. That you drank it all away." His laugh was bitter. "That's the story your father liked to tell, isn't it? But it's not the truth." I took a step closer. "Then what is?" He pulled a folded stack of papers from his coat. "Your father didn't build Lawrence Grain and Supply alone. He built it on my designs, my work. I was the one who modernized the machinery, who secured the first contracts. But when the money started rolling in, he cut me out. Changed the records. Made me vanish. And anyone who asked questions, well, they were silenced." My chest tightened. Silenced how? David's gaze flickered to the door, as though expecting shadows to move. "Accidents. A fall from a ladder. A car that never made it home. People stopped asking real quick." I shivered. The old rumors of farmhands gone missing, whispers I'd overheard as a child, it all flooded back. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because you're about to step into the fire," he said. "Samuel, right? He's not just backing you for your brilliance. He's backing you because he knows the cracks in your father's empire. And if you walk into that dinner unprepared, you'll be chewed apart by both of them." My knees felt weak. "You think Samuel's using me?" David's eyes softened. "He may care for you in his way. But investors don't bleed for people like us. They bleed us dry." I sank onto a bench, the wood groaning under my weight. All my life, I thought I was nothing because I couldn't live up to them. And now you're telling me the empire itself is built on a lie. David crouched before me, his voice urgent. "Yes. And you hold the chance to expose it. But you need more than just papers, Mary. You need the truth. Tomorrow, don't just reveal who you are. Reveal what he is." The storm outside broke then, rain slamming against the roof like a drum. Lightning flashed, casting David's face into sharp relief. "Why help me?" I asked. He smiled sadly. "Because I should have fought him years ago. I didn't. Maybe this is my second chance." By the time I left the depot, the rain had eased into a drizzle. The papers David had given me felt heavy in my bag, old contracts, letters, signatures that bore both his name and my father's. Evidence of betrayal, buried for decades. I walked through the wet streets, my dress clinging to me, my mind a storm of its own. The note, the phone call, the shadow, all of it led here. To the truth that my father's empire wasn't built by one man, but stolen from another. And tomorrow, in front of the whole town, I could tear away the mask he had worn my entire life. When I reached my apartment, the phone was ringing again. I answered with shaking hands. Mary, Samuel's voice. Calm, steady. "Where have you been?" "We need to finalize the strategy for tomorrow." I stared at the papers on my table. "Samuel, did you know about my uncle?" Silence. Then, "What uncle? Don't play games with me. Did you know my father cut him out?" That he built the company on theft. Samuel's tone cooled. Mary, listen to me. Old grudges are distractions. You don't need them. You already have everything you need in your hands, the deed, the acquisition offer. Don't complicate this. My grip tightened on the receiver. But the truth, he interrupted firmly, is what you make it tomorrow. Nothing else matters. The line went dead. I stood in the silence, the storm dripping outside, the weight of two futures pressing on me. Samuel wanted me to stick to the plan, reveal myself, humiliate my father, seal the acquisition. David wanted me to go further, expose the rot at the heart of the empire, destroy the myth once and for all. And me? I wanted something I couldn't yet name, justice, yes, but also freedom. As I closed the blinds for the night, I caught a glint on the opposite rooftop, a flash of metal, a figure crouched low, watching. By the time I blinked, it was gone. But the whisper returned, curling in the dark. Tomorrow, everything burns. Saturday evening draped the town in a restless hush. Street lamps flickered to life along Main, their light bending through the mist that still clung after the storm. The country club stood at the far edge of town, its brick walls washed pale by floodlights, windows glowing warm as though nothing bad could ever happen inside. But my hands trembled as I pulled open the heavy glass doors. Inside, the air smelled of polish and wine, the low hum of strings from a hired quartet weaving through the chatter of neighbors, businessmen, town officials. Laughter ricocheted off the vaulted ceiling. At the far end of the room, my father stood like a king in his court. Mother glittered at his side, pearls draped, lips painted, smile sharpened to perfection. John stood a step back, his tie neat, his face drawn but obedient. When I entered, eyes slid toward me like whispers. Some smiled politely, others with thinly veiled curiosity. Few bothered to greet me. After all, I was the daughter they hardly mentioned, the shadow. I kept walking, the envelope in my bag heavy as a stone. I found Samuel near the bar, his tall frame crisp in a gray suit, his expression calm but watchful. He leaned down, his words a low murmur only I could hear. Are you ready? I swallowed hard. As I'll ever be. His eyes searched mine. Then tonight you rise. But behind his smooth tone, I heard David's warning, investors don't bleed for people like us. They bleed us dry. My chest tightened. Two men. Two truths. And me caught between. Dinner dragged like a stage play. Plates of steak and potatoes arrived, glasses refilled with champagne. My father's voice boomed over the clink of silverware, recounting his life's work as though the town itself was indebted to his genius. And now, he said, standing, his voice filling the hall, it is time to pass the torch. My son John will lead Lawrence Grain and Supply into the future. Applause burst out. Chairs scraped as people stood, raising glasses, cheering. John forced a smile, nodding, though his eyes darted nervously to me across the room. I set my glass down. My pulse hammered. Samuel's hand brushed my shoulder. Now, he whispered. I rose. The applause faltered, unsure, curious. Father, I said, my voice carrying sharper than I expected, before you finish, there's something the room should know. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. My father froze, irritation flashing in his face like lightning. Mary, sit down. This is not your moment. My hands trembled as I reached into my bag. The envelope rasped against the fabric. I pulled it free and held it up. Actually, I said, my voice steadier now, this is exactly my moment. The room hushed, the only sound the faint rustle of the quartet trailing into silence. I stepped forward, each footfall loud against the polished floor. My father's glare sharpened, his hand tightening around his glass. You know clear text technologies, I said to the room. Some of you may even use its tools in your schools, your homes. A company worth over $200 million. Murmurs rippled. Heads turned, brows lifted. I stopped at the center of the room, my heart in my throat. The founder of ClearText has been hidden behind a name. A pseudonym. But that founder is me. Mary Lawrence. Gasps cut through the crowd. Mother's hand flew to her pearls, her face blanching. John's eyes widened, then softened with something that looked like pride. Father's glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the floor. "You expect us to believe this?" he barked. His voice cracked, not with disbelief, but with fear. "Yes," I said, pulling the deed from the envelope. I held it high. "Because it's the truth. My name, my signature, my company." Samuel stepped forward smoothly, addressing the crowd. "It's true. I've worked with Mary for years. She built this from nothing. And tonight, she brings more than just her name. She brings an offer." He nodded to me. I opened the second paper, the acquisition proposal. My voice rang out clear. Clear text is prepared to acquire Lawrence Grain and Supply for $60 million, a 20% premium above its current value. An offer that expires at noon tomorrow. Shock rippled like a storm through the hall. Glasses clinked, whispers hissed. Father's face reddened, his breath sharp. "You dare?" "Yes," I cut him off. "Because for years you called me a disappointment, an afterthought. You built your empire on dismissing me. But what you never realized, what none of you realized, is that while you laughed, I was building something greater." The silence stretched, every eye pinned to me. Then, a voice from the back. "She's right. Lawrence has been losing contracts to Clear Text for years." Another. "Their software saved my son's grades. He can finally read without struggling." The murmurs swelled, shifting like a tide. My father looked around, his authority slipping like sand. For the first time in my life, I saw doubt in his eyes. "Mary," he growled, "this is humiliation. For you. For us." "No," I said, my voice steady. "This is truth. And the truth doesn't humiliate, it reveals." Then, before he could answer, the heavy doors at the back of the hall slammed open. Uncle David stood there, soaked from the rain, clutching his own stack of papers. His voice rang out. "And if you think that's the whole truth, then you still don't know half of it." Gasps shuddered through the hall as every head turned toward the doors. Rain streaked down Uncle David's coat, his boots leaving dark prints on the polished floor. In his hands was a weathered folder, edges curled, pages spilling like ghosts. My father's face blanched. For the first time in my life, I saw something that looked like fear in his eyes. "You," he muttered. "You don't belong here." David's laugh was harsh, ragged. "That's what you told the whole town 20 years ago. That I was weak. That I drank my future away. But the truth is simpler, Thomas. You stole it from me." Murmurs rippled across the tables, chairs creaked as people leaned forward. I stood frozen, caught between the weight of my own revelation and this new bombshell. David strode down the aisle, his papers rattling in his hands. He slapped them onto the nearest table with a crack that silenced even the whispers. "Contracts," he barked. "Designs. Signatures. All mine. Before Thomas here erased me from the company ledger." He turned, his eyes sweeping the room. "You all think Thomas Lawrence built this empire alone. That he was the self-made king of grain and steel. But he built it on my work, my sweat. And when the profits grew too fat, he cut me out like rot from a crop." My father's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists. "Lies. You squandered your chance. Everyone knows." "No," David thundered, slamming his fist on the table. "Everyone knows what you told them. But the truth was buried with bribes, with fear. And with bodies." The room gasped. Mother's hand flew to her mouth. John's face paled. I swallowed hard. "Bodies?" I whispered. David's eyes locked on mine. "You remember the farmhands who never came back? The ones who vanished after accidents?" "They weren't accidents, Mary. They were warnings. To me. To anyone who dared question Thomas." My stomach twisted. Childhood whispers, fragments of overheard conversations, the way neighbors sometimes fell silent when my father's name came up, it all roared back with new, terrible meaning. Father barked a laugh, brittle and hollow. "This is slander. Drunken ramblings. You disgrace yourself, David." But his voice had lost its certainty. The crowd leaned away from him, their faces pale, their trust cracking. Samuel Wright stepped forward then, calm as ever, his polished shoes gleaming. "Gentlemen, perhaps this isn't the place." "Shut your mouth, investor," David snapped. "You knew. That's why you came sniffing around Mary. You smelled blood in the water. You saw Thomas's empire rotting from the inside, and you thought you could use her to gut it. The words struck like a hammer. My chest tightened, my eyes swinging to Samuel. He didn't flinch, but his jaw ticked once, subtle. "Mary," he said softly, "don't listen to this." David's laugh rang bitter. "Oh, she should listen. Because tomorrow morning, if she signs those papers, it won't just be her father's company swallowed. It'll be her soul." The room was chaos now, neighbors whispering, officials shifting uncomfortably, glasses left untouched. I stepped forward, my voice shaking, but loud enough to carry. Enough. All my life I was invisible in this family. Tonight I finally spoke. But if what David says is true, then everyone here deserves to know it. Father turned on me, his eyes burning. "Mary, don't you dare." "Don't I dare?" My voice cracked, but I held his gaze. "You never gave me anything to dare, Father. You gave me silence. Dismissal. Shame. But tonight, I won't be silent." I snatched the papers from David's folder and held them high. "If these are real, then your empire was never just yours. And if you silenced men to protect it, then the blood is on your hands." Gasps rattled the room. John stood suddenly, his voice trembling. "Is it true, Dad? Did you steal it all from Uncle David?" Father's face contorted. "I built this company. I fed this town. Don't you dare question me." "But I am questioning you," John shot back, louder now, his voice shaking but strong. "Because I've carried the weight of your expectations my whole life. And maybe it was all built on lies." The crowd erupted, whispers turning to shouts, chairs scraping, glasses spilling. The once-ordered dinner dissolved into chaos. My heart pounded as I turned to the people, raising my voice over the din. "For years, my father made me feel like nothing. Like a mistake. But tonight, you see the truth. I built clear text. I made something of my own. And maybe, just maybe, I'll do what he never could. Build something honest." All eyes were on me now. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was fire. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the back of the hall, sharp, commanding. "Mary Lawrence," it called, "step away from those papers." The crowd fell silent. At the doorway stood the sheriff, rain dripping from his hat brim, his hand resting on the holster at his side. His eyes fixed on me with a warning I couldn't yet name. The sheriff's boots thudded across the floor, slow and heavy, each step echoing through the country club hall. The crowd parted, eyes darting nervously, whispers coiling like smoke. Rainwater dripped from his coat, leaving a trail that glistened under the chandeliers. "Step away from those papers, Mary," he said, his voice low but carrying. My grip tightened around the documents. "Why?" His gaze flicked to my father, then back to me. "Because some truths can't be aired here. Not like this." Father straightened, seizing the moment. "Sheriff, remove her. She's trespassing on a family matter." But the sheriff didn't move toward me. His eyes stayed locked on mine. And in that long silence, I understood. He wasn't here for me. He was here to keep the peace, or to keep the past buried. David stepped forward, his voice raw. "You were part of it, weren't you? You kept your mouth shut when the men vanished. When the contracts were forged. You let him build his throne." The sheriff's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The crowd stirred uneasily, realization dawning. My father's empire wasn't just a monument of hard work. It was a monument of silence, a town that had looked away. I felt the weight of it pressed down, heavier than the envelope in my hands. I raised the deed high. All my life, I was told I didn't belong, that I wasn't enough. But tonight, you see me. You all see me. I built something real, something honest, something that gives people a chance. My voice trembled, then steadied. My father's company may be older, but it's crumbling. And tomorrow, the papers will prove it. Clear text will take what's left. Not because I need revenge, but because this town deserves better than lies. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. For a moment, I thought he'd step forward. But then he turned, slowly, and walked out the doors, leaving silence in his wake. Father surged toward me, his face mottled red, his voice a roar. "You ungrateful child. Do you know what you're doing? You're tearing this family apart." I met his fury with calm. "No, Father. You did that years ago. When you chose legacy over love. When you chose lies over truth. Tonight, I'm only showing everyone what was already broken. His hand shook as it hovered in the air, but he couldn't bring it down on me. Not anymore. His power had evaporated, drained away by the stares of the crowd, by the evidence in my hand, by the fire in my voice. Mother sank into her chair, her pearls clattering as her hands trembled. John stood motionless, tears shimmering in his eyes. David placed a hand on my shoulder. It's your choice now, Mary. End it or save what you can. I looked at the papers, the acquisition offer, the contracts proving theft, the deed that bore my name. My revenge was complete already. I had exposed him, brought the empire to its knees. But destruction alone wasn't enough. I wanted more. I wanted rebirth. I turned to the crowd. Tomorrow, Cleartext will move forward with the acquisition. But not to erase. To rebuild. To bring honesty where there was corruption. To give this town a future that isn't rotted at the roots. Gasps, murmurs, then something else, applause. Soft at first, then swelling. People rose to their feet, clapping not for Thomas Lawrence, not for John, but for me. For Mary. My father's voice broke through the noise, hoarse and bitter. You'll regret this. Mark my words, girl. The Lawrence spirit doesn't die. I looked at him one last time, my voice steady. You're right. It doesn't die. It just changes. Tonight, it belongs to me. Later, as the hall emptied and the rain subsided outside, John found me near the door. His shoulders sagged, his face pale, but his eyes held something new relief. You did it, he whispered. You finally made them see you. I touched his hand. John, you're free now too. You don't have to carry his dream. What do you want? His lips curved faintly. Not the business. Never the business. Maybe research. Medicine. Something that heals instead of crushes. I smiled. Then do it. Be your own man. The night ended with me stepping out into the cool air. The town stretched quiet before me. My heels clicked on the pavement, the papers safe in my bag. For the first time, I wasn't running from shadows. I was walking toward something brighter. The revenge was never just about humiliation. It was about truth. About showing them and myself that I had always been enough. I paused at the edge of the lot, the wet earth glistening under the moon, and whispered to the night, the phoenix rises. If you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or made to feel invisible, remember this story. Your voice matters. Your strength may be hidden, but it is waiting. And when it rises, no one can ignore it.